distillery in America, Jack Daniel's set the bar for Tennessee whiskey. Old Number 7 started as a World's Fair gold medal winner. 150 years later, it still has icon status.
You could remove the label from the bottle and people would still be able to look at it and say, that's a Jack Daniel's bottle.
This whiskey has long represented free spirits and independence. The Stones drank it proudly, and Frank Sinatra made it his staple beverage.
His daughter made sure that there was a bottle of Jack Daniel's buried with him.
1 billion liters ships to 140 countries every year, and every drop comes out of a dry town with one stoplight.
We think we make the finest whiskey in the world right here in Lynchburg.
It's hard to believe, but Jack Daniel's is made in a town where it's illegal to sell it. 80 years after Prohibition, Lynchburg, Tennessee is still dry.
You can't buy it liquor by the drink on the square here. There's not a bar. There's not a whiskey store here in town.
As a distillery, it's important to be close to your water source, and Jack struck liquid gold in the mid-1800s when he moved his distillery to Lynchburg's Cave Springs.
Every drop of Jack Daniel's is made from this spring water right here. Every drop.
The initial ingredients are the same as when Jack started: corn, malted barley, and rye. The mix has a very low percentage of rye.
Where most Kentucky bourbons are bold, peppery, or spicy, I describe Jack as being sweet to oaky in character.
150 trucks a week come through the distillery carting grain for the whiskey.
There's about 1 million pounds of grain a day that's being unloaded and elevated into our silos.
Jack Daniel's is a sour mash whiskey, which means that some of the spent grains from previous batches are used to start fermentation on a new batch.
What that means is basically that you recycle some of your distillate.
The spent grains are added to the ground corn and cave spring water and cooked in a mash cooker.
The mash cookers are basically heating up the grains, cooling them back down, and then setting them into the fermenter.
As the temperature cools, rye is added, and then barley malt, along with Jack Daniel's own strain of yeast.
The yeast that we use today is the one that we've had since Prohibition.
Because yeast decays when it's exposed to air or moisture, Jack Daniel's isn't taking any chances with their yeast.
We do keep the yeast cultures, in cryogenic storage as a backup measure.
The yeast in the mash will sit in the fermenting tanks for 4 to 6 days.
Okay, this fermenter was set approximately 3 hours ago. You can see how this one is starting to actively bubble.
After several hours, the yeast really gets rolling, not from heat, but from the yeast acting on the water and grains.
It takes each one of those molecules and splits it kind of 50-50 between a CO2 molecule and an ethanol molecule, or whiskey.
After the yeast has done its work, a liquid with about a 12% alcohol content is transferred to a copper still for distillation.
What you're doing inside a distillation column is just taking advantage of the fact that alcohol will become a vapor.
At the right temperature, alcohol will turn to vapor, but the excess water will remain liquid.
You want to be hot enough that you can vaporize the alcohol, but not so hot that you're also making steam from the water.
The vaporized alcohol is transferred and cooled back into a liquid. This time, the alcohol content is at a full 140 proof.
And then all you're going to do is collect that off into your condenser.
Next, the condensed whiskey is passed through charcoal made by burning ricks of sugar maple. It has no taste or smell when burned.
What we're using here is 140 proof whiskey. We start in the center.
The whiskey used as fuel for the fire is pulled straight from the still.
The reason we use that is because we don't want any kind of petroleum products.
After the wood is burned, it's cooled down and moved into the charcoal room for grinding.
We'll bring it in here and put it in this grinder and grind it up to about a 1/4 inch consistency. The reason we wanted a 1/4 inch consistency is it gives it more surface area.
More surface area ensures the whiskey will run through the charcoal and not around it.
What the charcoal does is filter the fusel oils and corn oils out of the whiskey. When it goes out the bottom of this 10 foot of this charcoal is 140 proof Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey.
The vats are made of white oak. The charcoal is changed out at least every 6 months.
It takes 4 to 5 days before the whiskey, for it to go from the top to the bottom.
What separates this Tennessee whiskey from bourbon is that bourbon doesn't undergo charcoal mellowing.
A bourbon goes from the still to the barrel to the warehouse. Tennessee whiskey goes from the still through the charcoal, the barrel, and then the warehouse.
And you know, too, what makes Jack Daniel's so unique too, we do make our own barrels too,
Like the vats, the barrels are made of American white oak. They're constructed at a cooperage in Louisville, Kentucky. The barrels are formed from cut and planed wood. The wood is steamed so it's pliable, then it's shaped.
Just like bourbon, Jack Daniel's, which is a Tennessee whiskey, must be aged in a new charred white oak barrel.
The whiskey's color and a lot of its flavor comes from the barrels themselves.
The barrel is a key ingredient in the making of whiskey, and it's why Jack Daniel's makes all of its own barrels.
The right char takes about 20 to 25 seconds.
Picture a marshmallow at a campfire being held just above the top of a flame. Slowly it starts to turn brown. Slowly the sugar and flavors and the color changes on the surface of the marshmallow.
The heads of the barrels are assembled and cut to size. And they're charred as well. Heads are added to the barrels. And then hoops are put on.
We have a head hoop, quarter hoop, and a bilge hoop. So each barrel receives 6 hoops, 2 of each of those.
Then bung holes are drilled. Once a barrel makes it onto the truck bound for Lynchburg, it'll be filled with whiskey within a week before the wood starts to dry out and shrink.
I'm gonna start with this one here. I spot the bung hole up. I took the filler lance in the bung hole and start the whiskey flow.
Each barrel holds about 56 gallons, and it takes about a minute to fill.
Now take a wooden bung, place over the hole. With one hit, you put the bung in the barrel.
The barrels will sit for 4 to 7 years to age before being bottled.
You know, you can taste some of the charred in it from the barrel, some of the vanilla taste from the barrel. So, you know, it's a very unique whiskey.
Jack Daniel's Old No. 7 has been made the same way for 150 years. And for connoisseurs around the world, they wouldn't want it any other way.
All those things Jack Daniel's did and dictated that we do, and we still do it today. What we do differently today is we just do all of that a lot better.
Gusti ajeng pripun malih yen niki sampun